She always seemed untouchable, a figure cloaked in elegance, poise, and the kind of charm that made millions of people trust her instinctively. But what if everything we thought we knew about her was a lie? What if the most intimate, life-changing moments she shared with the world, the ones we celebrated, the ones that inspired heartwarming headlines and viral moments, were carefully crafted illusions? What if her pregnancy, a milestone that captured the hearts of fans across the globe, was not real at all? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. It's a question that shocks even the most devoted royal watchers. Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, is no stranger to headlines. From her whirlwind romance with Prince Harry to her dramatic departure from royal duties, she has captivated, fascinated, and sometimes infuriated the world. But now, an astonishing confession threatens to unravel the story we've all been told for years. Kelly McKee-Zadgefin, Meghan's closest confidant, the person who was privy to the intimate truths of her life, has revealed something so staggering it leaves fans speechless. Meghan's pregnancy may have been completely fabricated. Imagine for a moment being one of those fans. You follow every announcement, you rejoice at the news of a growing family, you feel the anticipation as a new royal life is about to enter the world. You picture tiny hands, little socks, ultrasound pictures, and the soft curve of a bump growing each month. And then you hear that it might have all been a performance. Not out of necessity, not out of accident, but as a calculated, deliberate move. The very foundation of trust, loyalty, and admiration you had built around this woman begins to tremble. This story isn't just about celebrity gossip. It's about truth, betrayal, and the powerful narratives that shape public perception. When someone of Meghan Markle's stature shares life milestones, people believe them. They invest emotion, they follow the journey, they celebrate the milestones. And for Kelly McKee-Zadgefin to come forward and disclose that this life-altering event may have been entirely staged, it is nothing short of seismic. Fans are not just shocked, they are questioning everything. Kelly McKee-Zadgefin has always been a quiet observer, a loyal friend, and someone who maintained discretion in a world rife with scrutiny. She was more than just a friend. She was a confidant, someone who held the unfiltered truth, the behind-the-scenes moments that no one else could access. Her insights have been trusted by insiders and dismissed by outsiders. But now, her confession has thrown all skepticism into turmoil. She claims she saw things, knew things, and endured the inner conflict of knowing something monumental while watching millions of people believe in a carefully constructed illusion. Why would someone do this? What could drive a public figure to manufacture a pregnancy? Was it pressure? Was it strategy? Or was it a desire to manipulate the narrative for reasons no one fully understands? These are questions that immediately come to mind, questions that we will explore in depth over the course of this story. Kelly's revelations are not just shocking. They are complex, layered with emotional, psychological, and social implications that reach far beyond one individual. This is a tale of trust and betrayal, of public perception versus private reality, and of the shocking lengths someone may go to control the story told about them. The confession itself did not come quietly. According to sources close to Kelly, it began as small, seemingly offhand comments. A whisper here, a casual remark there. But soon, the magnitude of what she knew could no longer be contained. The quiet observations turned into frank discussions, the private musings turned into undeniable admissions, and the world got its first glimpse into the truth behind the headlines. Kelly spoke not just of inconsistencies in timelines or odd behaviors, but of a calculated effort to present an event that may never have actually occurred. Each statement she made carried weight, not just because of who she was, but because she was there, witnessing it all unfold. And the timing of this confession is critical, with Meghan Markle continuing to dominate headlines. From Netflix docuseries deals to media appearances and public commentary, the revelation has arrived at a moment when scrutiny is at its peak. Fans are dissecting every image, every interview, every social media post. Every detail, no matter how small, is being analyzed under the harsh light of a possible deception. Kelly's words have sparked debates, ignited fan theories, and prompted questions about what is real and what is performance. As we dive into this story, it's important to remember that this is not just about Meghan Markle. It's about understanding the machinery of public perception, the power of influence, and the fragility of trust. When a public figure like Meghan presents something as personal and authentic as pregnancy, the world believes. And when someone from the inside, the trusted friend, reveals that belief may have been misplaced, the fallout is profound. People feel cheated, fans feel betrayed, and the narrative we've built around this royal family begins to wobble in unexpected ways. Now, let's be clear. This isn't a story built on rumor or speculation. Kelly McKee-Zajfan's confession is grounded in direct knowledge, first-hand observation, and a willingness to speak out despite the personal risk. She has seen, she has experienced, and she has chosen to reveal the truth in a way that leaves no room for doubt, or at least, leaves the public grappling with their assumptions and the facts presented. The implications of her confession are enormous. Not just for Meghan Markle, not just for the royal family, but for the millions of people who have followed, adored, and celebrated the supposed milestones of a life that may have been staged. Think about the psychology of it. When someone announces a pregnancy, it's a moment of shared human emotion. There is joy, anticipation, hope. Families gather, friends celebrate, fans cheer. And when it's later revealed to be fabricated or even questioned, the emotional shock isn't just a mild disappointment. It's a profound betrayal. It's a rupture of trust. It forces people to question not just the public figure, but themselves. How could they have been so wrong? How could they have been so completely convinced? That's the emotional weight of Kelly's confession. And it's what makes this story so compelling, so necessary, and so explosive. But perhaps the most shocking part is not just the revelation itself, but what it implies about the broader world Meghan navigates. A world where image, perception, and narrative can outweigh fact, where loyalty can be bought, coerced, or manipulated, and where the truths that fans hold dear are sometimes at the mercy of carefully crafted personas. Kelly's confession offers a rare glimpse into that world, one that is raw, unfiltered, and potentially devastating. It shows that even the closest friends can witness realities that the public will never see, realities that challenge everything we think we know about someone we thought we understood. And yet, even as the confession drops, the story is far from over. There are layers yet to uncover, twists that have yet to be revealed, and emotional truths that will leave you questioning what is real and what is constructed. In the chapters ahead, we will explore Kelly's insights, dissect the evidence, trace timelines, and uncover moments that no media outlet has dared to analyze in full. We will examine the psychological pressures, the media manipulation, and the emotional stakes involved in what could be one of the most shocking royal revelations in modern history. Fans, prepare yourselves. This isn't a tale of casual gossip. It's a deep dive into the inner workings of a life lived in the spotlight, where every smile, every public appearance, and every supposed milestone is carefully curated. Kelly McKee-Zajfan's confession is the key that unlocks a story hidden in plain sight, a story that challenges assumptions, disrupts narratives, and forces us all to confront uncomfortable truths. It is the kind of revelation that makes you question everything you thought you knew about Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, and the world that has surrounded her. She was Meghan Markle's secret weapon, the confidant everyone assumed would stay silent forever. But as Kelly McKee-Zajfan herself revealed, sometimes the closest friendships hide truths that no one expects. The story of Meghan and Kelly begins long before royal titles, red carpets, and tabloids. Before the global spotlight turned Meghan into an icon of glamour and intrigue. It begins in quiet moments, late-night phone calls, shared confidences, and the kind of trust that only forms when two people understand each other in ways the world can't see. Kelly and Meghan met years ago, in a setting that seemed ordinary at first glance. But for two ambitious, driven women navigating the pressures of careers, social circles, and personal challenges, their bond quickly deepened. They shared more than casual laughs. They shared vulnerabilities. Kelly saw Meghan in ways that no reporter, no photographer, and no casual acquaintance ever could. She saw the unfiltered moments, the fears, the anxieties, the ambitions, and the careful strategies Meghan employed to manage both public perception and private life. What made this friendship extraordinary wasn't just proximity, it was intimacy of trust. Friends like Kelly are rare. They are the ones you tell your secrets to without hesitation. They are the people who witness your life unfold behind closed doors, who know your habits, your fears, and your private victories. Kelly was all of that for Meghan, and yet, that closeness became the source of one of the most shocking revelations in recent royal history. Imagine being in Kelly's position. You watch your friend, someone you have defended, admired, and believed in, step into the global spotlight. Every move scrutinized, every announcement dissected, every personal milestone celebrated by millions of strangers. And then, amidst all the adoration and public fascination, you notice inconsistencies. Small at first, subtle. A timeline that doesn't quite add up. A comment that seems slightly off. A gesture that doesn't match the narrative being presented. These are the moments that create doubt, even in the most loyal of friends. Kelly's loyalty was tested repeatedly. She had to weigh the personal consequences of speaking out against her devotion to the truth. After all, Meghan's life was now not only public but political, strategic, and symbolic. The stakes were enormous. For Kelly, the challenge wasn't just observing these inconsistencies. It was deciding whether to act on them, whether to reveal what she knew, and whether the world would even believe her. Their friendship had moments of genuine warmth and care, too. Kelly recalls long nights of conversation where Meghan expressed her hopes, fears, and the kind of intimate musings that friends only share in the quiet of late-night calls or private dinners. These are the moments fans never see. These are the moments that build the illusion of transparency and authenticity. Kelly witnessed Meghan as a woman, not just as a celebrity or royal. She saw the humor, the charm, the intellect, and the vulnerabilities that made Meghan relatable. And yet, even within these private, seemingly genuine moments, the seeds of deception, according to Kelly, were quietly planted. What made Kelly's confession particularly shocking is the duality of her role. She was both a friend and a witness. She had access to Meghan's personal world, the conversations and decisions that shaped every public narrative. But being close to someone doesn't always equate to knowing everything. In fact, it can make the eventual revelation even more painful. Friends see enough to trust, but not enough to question, or at least, not until they witness something undeniable. Kelly describes a series of events and observations that, in hindsight, pointed to the manufactured nature of Meghan's pregnancy narrative. She noticed patterns in social media posts, carefully curated photo opportunities, and the way certain announcements were timed with precision. Nothing overt, nothing extreme, just subtle signs that, when pieced together, formed a pattern too deliberate to ignore. What made it harder was the context. Meghan's life was under constant scrutiny. Every move analyzed by the media, dissected by fans, and judged by royalty experts. In such an environment, minor discrepancies might be dismissed as stress, oversight, or coincidence. But for Kelly, the coincidences became too many to ignore. The very things that made Meghan appear flawless, her poise, her perfect timing, her controlled demeanor, were the very things that hinted at something being off. Kelly's perspective is unique because of her position. She didn't rely on public reports or tabloid speculation. She was there. She saw the private planning, the behind-the-scenes maneuvering, and the conversations that never reached the press. She witnessed a world where image sometimes took precedence over authenticity, where perception was carefully molded, and where the truth became malleable in the service of a narrative. And in that world, she observed a milestone, one that was celebrated worldwide, as possibly not real. This is not just a story of betrayal, it's a story of moral conflict. Kelly had to reconcile her admiration and affection for Meghan with the knowledge that millions of people might have been misled. She had to consider the consequences of speaking out, the backlash from fans, the legal and social ramifications, and the emotional toll of revealing a secret that was deeply personal. It was a burden that grew heavier with time, and eventually, it became impossible to ignore. The revelation itself, when it finally came, was both subtle and explosive. Kelly didn't scream her confession from the rooftops. It began in private, in a conversation that seemed innocent at first. But as details emerged, the implications became clear. She described the inconsistencies, the calculated appearances, and the moments that, in retrospect, hinted at a narrative carefully constructed rather than naturally occurring. Fans of Meghan Markle were stunned, not just by the allegation itself, but by the source. Kelly's credibility, built over years of friendship and trust, gave weight to every word. Even more shocking, the confession didn't exist in isolation. It tied into broader patterns of media manipulation, public perception, and celebrity strategy. Kelly painted a picture of a world where image was everything, where truth could be curated, and where loyalty was tested at the intersection of friendship and moral responsibility. For viewers, this isn't just gossip. It's a glimpse into the inner workings of a life lived under constant public pressure, where every personal moment is scrutinized, and where the consequences of revealing the truth can be enormous. As we explore this friendship further, it's important to understand the human element. Meghan Markle is not merely a public figure. She is a woman navigating immense pressure, personal ambition, and public scrutiny. Kelly McKee-Zajfin is not merely a friend. She is a witness, a moral compass, and someone who had to decide how much to protect and how much to reveal. Their dynamic is fascinating, tense, and layered with emotion. It's a story of loyalty and betrayal, trust and doubt, love and disillusionment. All the elements of a drama that could have come straight out of a novel, yet it unfolded in real life, in the glare of the public eye. And yet, even after years of friendship, years of shared confidences, and countless private moments, the question remained: what happens when a friend crosses a line from private observation to public revelation? How does one reconcile the affection and loyalty built over years with the moral imperative to reveal a truth that shakes the foundation of trust? This tension is at the heart of Kelly's confession, and it's what makes the story so gripping, so compelling, and so shocking. Fans, imagine witnessing someone you trust implicitly making a choice to step into the public eye with a revelation that will change everything. Imagine the courage, the fear, and the ethical turmoil that must accompany such a decision. Kelly McKee-Zajfin stepped into that world, and the consequences reverberated far beyond her immediate circle. Her confession wasn't just about Meghan's alleged pregnancy. It was about the fragility of perception, the complexity of friendship, and the explosive power of truth in a world built on carefully curated narratives. But what Kelly revealed wasn't simply a story of deception. It was a story of loyalty tested, of intimate knowledge wielded as power, and of the profound impact a single confession can have on millions of people. As we move into the next chapter, we will explore the pregnancy announcement that captured the world, the reactions it sparked, and the subtle inconsistencies that Kelly McKee-Zajfin noticed long before the rest of the world caught on. And in doing so, we'll begin to understand why this friendship, once trusted above all else, became the source of one of the most shocking royal revelations of our time. The moment Meghan Markle announced her pregnancy, the world collectively held its breath. Headlines blazed across newspapers, news channels ran special reports, and social media exploded with congratulations, speculation, and excitement. Millions of fans felt an immediate connection to the news, imagining a tiny life growing inside the Duchess, picturing a perfect family, and anticipating the royal arrival with warmth and joy. For many, it was the culmination of a fairy tale narrative that had captivated hearts worldwide. But what if the story that inspired such emotion was not what it seemed? From the outside, the announcement seemed flawless. Meghan, radiant and composed, smiled for cameras, showing just enough joy to make the public feel included in her happiness. Prince Harry beamed, proud and supportive, as they shared the news in a carefully choreographed media moment. Social media users posted reactions in real time, memes went viral, and even casual observers were swept up in the global enthusiasm. Everything appeared normal, joyous, and authentic. Yet, according to Kelly McKee-Zajfin, the Duchess's closest friend and confidant, the reality behind those smiles may have been something entirely different. Kelly had noticed small inconsistencies long before the public celebrated. Subtle patterns in Meghan's appearances, inconsistencies in timelines, and details that didn't quite match the narrative being presented. To the casual observer, these would have seemed minor, inconsequential, or easily explainable. But Kelly, who had been with Meghan through countless private moments, noticed the accumulation of small anomalies, enough to create a pattern that hinted at something carefully staged. Think about it. In a world where every gesture, every social media post, Every smile is scrutinized by millions. Could a pregnancy be convincingly faked? Kelly's perspective was uniquely credible. She had access to the private life behind the headlines, the moments when Meghan was unguarded, the conversations that never reached the press, and the planning that went into every public appearance. According to Kelly, certain behaviors, appearances, and announcements didn't align with what one would expect from someone genuinely expecting a child. And these discrepancies, she explained, were not mere mistakes. They were signs of a narrative carefully curated for maximum impact. It all began, according to Kelly, with the very first announcement. Meghan and Harry had just returned from a public engagement, and the timing of the pregnancy reveal seemed almost too perfect. Every detail, from Meghan's wardrobe choice to the media outlets that received the news first, was orchestrated to achieve a specific effect: admiration, public sympathy, and reinforcement of the perfect royal couple narrative. Fans marveled at the timing, assuming it was spontaneous joy shared with the world. But Kelly knew better. She noticed patterns in scheduling, last-minute adjustments, and behaviors that didn't match the excitement one might expect from a genuinely expectant mother. What made Kelly's observations even more compelling was her understanding of Meghan's meticulous nature. Meghan was strategic in nearly every aspect of her life: career choices, friendships, media appearances, and now, according to Kelly, public milestones. This wasn't carelessness, it was careful planning. The very qualities that had made Meghan an admired figure, poise, control, and awareness, also provided the tools necessary to stage a pregnancy convincingly. For the public, these nuances were invisible. Fans celebrated ultrasound images, maternity photo shoots, and hospital visits without suspicion. But Kelly, as an insider, could see the inconsistencies clearly. She noticed, for example, the lack of certain typical signs: visits to prenatal doctors outside of highly controlled environments, natural physical changes that might indicate a real pregnancy, and private conversations that usually accompany such milestones. To Kelly, these absences were not coincidences. They were intentional gaps, designed to protect the narrative and avoid scrutiny. And yet, even as she observed these signs, Kelly struggled with disbelief. Could someone truly fabricate a pregnancy convincingly enough to fool millions, including family, friends, and the media? It seemed almost impossible. But the more she watched, the more undeniable it became. There were moments when Meghan's behavior did not align with the experience of someone expecting a child, moments of rehearsed expressions, staged photographs, and calculated timing that seemed designed to evoke maximum empathy and admiration. Consider the public reaction at the time. Fans flooded social media with messages of joy, memes celebrated the royal news, and even seasoned journalists praised the couple for their transparency. Meanwhile, Kelly knew the truth was far more complex. She described feeling a growing tension, caught between loyalty to a friend and responsibility to acknowledge a reality that contradicted everything the public believed. This was not merely speculation. Kelly had witnessed private conversations, planning sessions, and controlled media moments that suggested an elaborate orchestration of perception. The reactions extended beyond fans to the media itself. Analysts, royal commentators, and celebrity magazines weighed in, praising Meghan for her grace, her composure, and her ability to connect with the public during this joyous announcement. Yet, beneath the veneer of admiration, Kelly noticed subtle behaviors, gestures, pauses, and carefully controlled appearances that hinted at a narrative meticulously designed to manipulate public sentiment. In short, everything was being curated for effect, leaving few clues for the outside world to question its authenticity. But what about the supposed physical signs of pregnancy? Kelly revealed that some of these were highly controlled or even fabricated for public consumption. Outfits designed to accentuate a bump, staged photographs with selective angles, and media releases timed to reinforce the story. All of these contributed to a convincing, but potentially misleading, image. For fans who did not have access to these private details, the presentation seemed genuine, heartfelt, and relatable. For Kelly, it was a carefully constructed illusion. One of the most startling elements, according to Kelly, was the timing and consistency of media appearances. Meghan would appear at certain events with exactly the right wardrobe, smile, and posture, everything calibrated to support the public perception of a pregnancy. These appearances were interspersed with private moments, visible only to a select few, that suggested a different reality. Kelly, as someone close to Meghan, saw both worlds, the public performance and the private reality. And that duality was what ultimately led her to reveal the shocking truth. Fans may ask themselves, how could such an elaborate fabrication go unnoticed? How could millions of people, journalists, and even close associates fail to detect the deception? The answer, according to Kelly, lies in the combination of Meghan's careful planning, the selective involvement of trusted allies, and the public's desire to believe. People want to celebrate milestones, they want to believe in fairy tales, and they are often willing to suspend disbelief when presented with a compelling narrative. Kelly's confession shattered that comfort, forcing fans to confront the possibility that what they had celebrated might have been staged. The emotional impact of this revelation cannot be overstated. Those who had followed Meghan's journey with admiration now faced doubt and betrayal. They questioned not just the pregnancy itself, but the authenticity of every public milestone, every emotional statement, and every private revelation shared with the world. Kelly's confession was more than a disclosure. It was a rupture in the trust between public figures and the audience that invests in their stories. Yet, as shocking as Kelly's observations were, they only hinted at a deeper narrative. Behind the controlled appearances and carefully timed announcements, there were personal, strategic, and potentially manipulative motivations at play. Why stage a pregnancy? What was the purpose of presenting an illusion to millions while controlling every detail behind the scenes? Kelly's insights suggest that the answer is far more complex than mere deception. It involves calculated media management, influence over public perception, and a sophisticated understanding of celebrity power dynamics. As we continue, the story becomes even more revealing. The inconsistencies Kelly observed are not isolated anomalies. They are part of a broader pattern that raises questions about authenticity, loyalty, and the blurred line between public image and private reality. Fans will be stunned as we explore the private moments, the hidden strategies, and the subtle signs that pointed to a carefully orchestrated narrative. And yet, despite all the evidence Kelly uncovered, the public remains largely unaware of the full scope of the truth. The narrative continues to unfold, and the implications reach far beyond a single event. Every carefully staged moment, every meticulously timed announcement, and every public appearance now takes on new significance. For those watching closely, the celebration of a pregnancy is no longer a simple story of joy. It is a window into a world of strategy, manipulation, and the tension between perception and reality. It started as a whisper, almost imperceptible to anyone outside the inner circle. A casual comment here, a subtle remark there, innocuous, almost forgettable if taken in isolation. But for Kelly McKee-Zajfin, Meghan Markle's closest friend, those small hints were like pieces of a puzzle she had been assembling in secret for months, maybe years. And what she began to realize would change everything she thought she knew about her friend, and the life millions of fans had come to believe was real. Imagine sitting across from someone you trust implicitly, someone who has shared your late-night conversations, your fears, your dreams, and your deepest vulnerabilities. You believe you know them, understand their motives, and can read their expressions like an open book. And yet, over time, subtle behaviors, contradictions, and inconsistencies begin to nag at your mind. You tell yourself it's nothing, that it's just stress or coincidence. But the nagging grows, until finally, the truth becomes unavoidable. This was Kelly's reality. Kelly recalls the first moments when she began to suspect something unusual about Meghan's pregnancy. It wasn't a single event or a glaring mistake. It was a series of small observations, almost invisible to anyone else. A slight hesitation during a conversation about doctor visits. The timing of a social media post that seemed carefully calculated rather than spontaneous. A comment about cravings or discomfort that didn't align with the typical progression of pregnancy. For Kelly, these were not random anomalies. They were signals. Subtle, but deliberate. What made these hints even more compelling was the pattern they formed over time. It wasn't just one or two inconsistencies. It was a string of them, building into a narrative that suggested control, planning, and perhaps even deception. Kelly noticed that Meghan's public appearances, photo ops, and social media updates followed a precise rhythm. Each was timed to maximize attention, minimize scrutiny, and reinforce the perception of a joyous, natural pregnancy. The meticulousness of it all, in Kelly's eyes, suggested that something more than happenstance was at play. At first, Kelly tried to rationalize her suspicions. Maybe she was overthinking it. Maybe she was letting her loyalty and emotional attachment cloud her judgment. But the more she observed, the more undeniable the signs became. Patterns emerged in Meghan's behavior, in the timing of announcements, and even in the carefully controlled ways she presented her physical appearance. Kelly began to realize that these weren't mere coincidences. They were elements of a carefully curated narrative designed to control perception. The psychological toll of this realization was immense. Kelly loved her friend. She had shared countless moments of vulnerability and trust with Meghan. To suspect that a monumental life event, a pregnancy that captivated the world, might not be real was almost unbearable. Yet the evidence she observed was compelling enough that she could not ignore it. It created a tension that haunted her, a moral dilemma between protecting a friend and acknowledging the truth. Kelly describes one particularly telling moment when she realized the implications of what she had been observing. A casual conversation about timelines revealed discrepancies that were impossible to reconcile. A mention of a doctor's appointment contradicted a social media post. A comment about physical symptoms didn't align with previous statements. To the casual observer, these might have seemed minor. But for Kelly, who had intimate knowledge of Meghan's routines and behaviors, they were glaring indicators of a larger narrative at play. As Kelly began to piece together these subtle hints, she also observed the reactions of those around her. Close friends, family members, and associates reacted in ways that suggested they, too, sensed something unusual. Some were visibly uncomfortable. Others avoided the topic altogether. And yet, the public continued to celebrate, oblivious to the inconsistencies unfolding behind the scenes. The dichotomy between public perception and private reality was stark, and it weighed heavily on Kelly. The stakes were not just personal, they were public. Meghan's pregnancy had been a global event, celebrated by millions. The media covered every detail, from fashion choices to baby names. Fans speculated endlessly about birth plans, nursery decor, and family dynamics. And yet, Kelly's suspicions suggested that this carefully constructed image might not match the reality of the situation. The implications were enormous. If she was right, the trust of millions had been manipulated, and the carefully curated narrative of Meghan's life had been presented under false pretenses. Kelly's first hints were just the beginning. As she continued to observe, more inconsistencies emerged. Private conversations revealed controlled messaging strategies, selective sharing of information, and moments that, in retrospect, seemed designed to mislead. Kelly began to understand that she was witnessing not just a series of anomalies, but a deliberate orchestration of perception. The realization was shocking, disorienting, and, at times, heartbreaking. What makes this confession so compelling is the duality of Kelly's role. She was both a friend and a witness. She had unparalleled access to Meghan's private world, yet that access revealed truths that were difficult to process emotionally. She knew the public adored Meghan. She knew fans celebrated every milestone. And she knew that revealing her observations could shatter not only her friend's carefully constructed image, but also the trust of millions of people who had invested in it emotionally. Despite these challenges, Kelly could no longer remain silent. She had glimpsed moments that suggested a pattern too deliberate to ignore. She had observed behaviors that contradicted the natural progression of pregnancy. And she had seen the careful orchestration of public appearances, social media posts, and media interactions that reinforced the perception of a life-changing event that, according to her observations, might not have been real. Kelly's first hints created a private tension that would later explode into a public revelation. She wrestled with questions that most friends would never have to face. How much should I reveal? How will this affect my friend? How will the public react? Can I trust my own judgment, or am I misinterpreting what I've seen? These questions weighed on her, shaping her internal narrative and preparing her for the moment when she would finally share what she had observed. The emotional stakes were high. To reveal the truth was to risk friendship, loyalty, and public backlash. To remain silent was to live with the burden of knowing that millions were being misled. Kelly chose the former, understanding that the moral imperative of truth outweighed personal comfort. Her confession, when it came, would leave fans shocked, divided, and questioning the reality they had accepted for so long. And yet, even as Kelly began to reveal these hints, the story was far from complete. The first suspicions were only the surface of a deeper narrative, one that involved calculated timing, public perception management, and the extraordinary lengths someone might go to control their story. What Kelly observed was not just a single deception. It was a pattern, a strategy, and a revelation that would eventually shake the foundations of trust between public figures and their audience. It was a day like any other in the fast-moving world of celebrity news, until it wasn't. Social media feeds, news alerts, and tabloid headlines erupted simultaneously with a single revelation. Kelly McKee-Zajfin, Meghan Markle's closest friend, had finally spoken out. Her confession about Meghan's pregnancy, which she had quietly been hinting at for months, was now public. And the impact was immediate, electrifying, and unforgettable. Imagine waking up to this news as a fan. You scroll through your phone, thinking it's just another viral story, another tabloid exaggeration. But the words hit you like a thunderclap. Meghan Markle's pregnancy, the milestone millions had celebrated, the news that had inspired joy, anticipation, and admiration across the globe. According to Meghan's closest friend, it might not have been real. Fans didn't just gasp, they froze, unsure if they could believe what they were reading. The disbelief was palpable. Kelly's confession did not come with fanfare or theatrics. It began quietly, in an interview conducted by a journalist known for deep-dive reporting and an audience that demanded credibility. The initial comments seemed measured, almost understated. But as the conversation progressed, the magnitude of her statements became impossible to ignore. Kelly described the inconsistencies, the carefully orchestrated appearances, and the behind-the-scenes details that suggested Meghan's pregnancy might have been a calculated narrative rather than an organic life event. For insiders who had long suspected something was off, Kelly's words confirmed suspicions. For the public, they shattered assumptions. Every social media post, every maternity photo, every hospital announcement now seemed subject to reevaluation. Fans were forced to confront the possibility that their emotional investment had been manipulated, not maliciously, perhaps, but deliberately orchestrated to create a perception of authenticity. The reactions were immediate and intense. Online forums exploded with debate. Some fans refused to believe it, accusing Kelly of betrayal or exaggeration. Others embraced the revelation, pointing to inconsistencies they had noticed but never fully understood. Memes, tweets, and videos flooded the internet as people processed the implications. The confession had not only disrupted the narrative surrounding Meghan Markle, but had also ignited a global conversation about trust, friendship, and the influence of curated public personas. Kelly described her thought process leading up to the confession in painstaking detail. She wrestled with loyalty, guilt, and the ethical responsibility of knowing a truth that millions had invested in emotionally. Speaking out wasn't just a decision, it was a moral imperative. She weighed the potential fallout against the need for transparency, ultimately deciding that honesty, however painful, was necessary. Her revelation was not a spontaneous act of anger or revenge. It was the culmination of months, perhaps years, of observation, reflection, and internal debate. What made this confession even more compelling was the level of detail Kelly provided. She didn't merely say the pregnancy was fake. She described specific moments, timelines, and behaviors that, when viewed together, painted a convincing picture. From the timing of social media posts to the controlled nature of public appearances, Kelly offered evidence that suggested the narrative had been meticulously curated. Fans were not just hearing speculation. They were being presented with insider insight that challenged the very story they had been celebrating. The media frenzy intensified as reporters and commentators dissected every word of Kelly's interview. Analysts highlighted key phrases, scrutinized the chronology of events, and connected the dots between public appearances and private observations. Talk shows debated the credibility of the confession, while social media influencers created content analyzing and interpreting every detail. What had started as a quiet revelation quickly escalated into a full-blown cultural moment, with implications reaching far beyond celebrity gossip. For Kelly, The day the confession dropped was both liberating and terrifying. She had finally spoken the truth, but the backlash and scrutiny were inevitable. Friends, acquaintances, and fans reacted with shock, disbelief, and in some cases, hostility. The emotional weight of her decision was enormous, but so was the clarity it provided. By stepping forward, she validated the suspicions of insiders and forced the public to reconsider the narrative they had accepted without question. As the day unfolded, additional details emerged that added layers to the story. Social media posts were re-examined, photos were analyzed, and commentators began to notice the patterns Kelly had highlighted. What had once seemed like minor inconsistencies now appeared deliberate, almost choreographed. Fans began to understand that the revelation was not simply a personal disclosure. It was an exposé on the careful construction of public image, celebrity influence, and the manipulation of perception. And yet, even as the confession captured global attention, there were unanswered questions. How long had this been orchestrated? Who else within Meghan's circle was aware of the inconsistencies? What motivated the decision to maintain the appearance of pregnancy, and what were the consequences for those involved? These questions, unanswered and tantalizing, created a sense of suspense that gripped the audience, compelling them to follow the story as it continued to unfold. The emotional impact of the confession cannot be overstated. Fans who had felt a personal connection to Meghan's journey now experienced a mix of betrayal, disbelief, and curiosity. Those who had celebrated every milestone were forced to confront the possibility that their trust had been manipulated. Kelly's words had transformed a moment of shared joy into a complex web of intrigue, ethical dilemmas, and public debate. Even within Meghan's circle, the reaction was intense. Associates and insiders scrambled to respond, some attempting to downplay the revelation, others expressing quiet concern. Kelly's confession had disrupted the carefully maintained equilibrium, introducing tension and uncertainty into relationships that had once seemed secure. The ripple effects extended beyond friendship. They touched reputation, media perception, and the broader narrative surrounding Meghan Markle's public persona. What made this confession so unforgettable was the combination of credibility, intimacy, and timing. Kelly had been a witness to moments no one else had seen. She had observed private conversations, planning sessions, and controlled appearances that suggested a pattern of manipulation. And she chose the precise moment to share her observations, ensuring that the impact would be maximum and the implications undeniable. It wasn't just what she said, it was who she was when she said it, and the trust she had earned over years of friendship. Fans immediately began dissecting every aspect of the story. Social media exploded with speculation, debates, and conspiracy theories. Every previously celebrated photo, announcement, or public appearance was now subject to reinterpretation. What had been viewed as spontaneous joy was now analyzed as a potential performance. And what had been perceived as a natural milestone was scrutinized for evidence of orchestration. The confession also sparked broader discussions about loyalty, truth, and the ethics of friendship. Kelly's decision to speak out challenged the norms of discretion and confidentiality that often govern personal relationships, particularly among public figures. It forced fans and insiders alike to consider the tension between protecting a friend and revealing a truth that has wide-reaching implications. But despite the intensity of the media coverage, the public was only seeing the tip of the iceberg. Kelly's initial confession hinted at deeper layers of intrigue, private revelations, and strategic planning that had yet to be fully disclosed. The stage was set for even more explosive details that would challenge assumptions, disrupt narratives, and compel the world to reconsider the life and image of Meghan Markle. And as the day drew to a close, one fact became undeniable. The confession had changed everything. The world could no longer look at Meghan Markle's pregnancy or her public persona the same way. Fans were left grappling with questions of authenticity, trust, and perception, while the media raced to interpret, analyze, and report on the unprecedented revelation. Not everyone in Meghan Markle's inner circle was fooled, Kelly McKee-Zajfin revealed, her words carrying the weight of years spent observing, analyzing, and quietly questioning the narrative surrounding her closest friend. Inside Meghan's world, things were far from what the public saw. There was a carefully curated image, meticulously managed appearances, and a set of confidants who were sometimes included in the truth and sometimes left in the dark. For Kelly, being inside that circle meant seeing the real Meghan, witnessing the strategies that controlled public perception, and understanding the pressures of living under relentless scrutiny. Imagine being part of a circle where loyalty is expected but questions are quietly discouraged, where every word, every gesture, every social media post is calculated to project the perfect persona. Inside Meghan's circle, appearances mattered as much as authenticity, and sometimes more. Those who were closest to her could glimpse the private realities, but even they had to navigate a delicate balance between truth, loyalty, and discretion. Kelly's observations, as she later revealed, painted a complex picture, one of friendships tested, loyalties strained, and moral dilemmas that weighed heavily on everyone involved. The inner circle was small but influential. It included friends, advisors, staff, and confidants, each with access to moments that were invisible to the public eye. These were the people who saw Meghan without filters, without the cameras, media teams, and PR strategies shaping her image. And yet, even within this intimate circle, there were signs of tension, doubt, and subtle unease. Some associates noticed inconsistencies, questioned motives, or simply felt uncomfortable with the way narratives were being shaped. For Kelly, these moments were critical. They confirmed that what she suspected privately was not isolated. It was part of a broader pattern of control and image management. Kelly described the dynamic inside the circle as a careful balancing act. Meghan's charisma and influence commanded attention, but it also demanded loyalty. Questions were rarely answered fully, and certain topics were subtly redirected or dismissed. Conversations were carefully navigated, with unspoken rules about what could be discussed and what was better left unsaid. For insiders, this created a climate of partial understanding. They could see glimpses of the truth, but the full picture remained obscured. One of the most revealing aspects of the inner circle, according to Kelly, was the strategic planning behind public appearances. Every photo, event, and announcement was orchestrated to maximize perception and minimize scrutiny. Wardrobe choices, timing of statements, and the release of personal milestones were all calculated with precision. For fans and the media, these seemed like natural elements of celebrity life. For Kelly, they were evidence of a controlled narrative, carefully maintained and tightly monitored. The inner circle also played a role in reinforcing certain narratives. Friends and staff often served as buffers between Meghan and the public, managing inquiries, shaping messaging, and ensuring that appearances aligned with desired perceptions. While most of these actions were benign, some crossed into the territory of manipulation, subtle guidance, selective sharing of information, and the strategic placement of moments designed to reinforce specific impressions. Kelly, who had witnessed these actions firsthand, recognized the implications. It was not merely image management. It was storytelling on a grand scale, one that affected millions of people who believed they were witnessing spontaneous, authentic life events. Relationships within the circle were complex. Trust was essential, but it was also conditional. Friends like Kelly had to navigate delicate boundaries, balancing their loyalty to Meghan with the need to maintain their own integrity. Observing inconsistencies was one thing. Acting on them was another. Kelly often found herself in a state of quiet tension, aware of contradictions that the public could never see, yet uncertain about how to respond. Her loyalty was tested repeatedly, as was her understanding of what constituted ethical behavior in such a high-stakes environment. Kelly recounted moments when she witnessed strategic discussions that directly affected public perception. Timing of social media posts, staged photo shoots, and selective disclosures were all topics of conversation. While these might appear trivial to outsiders, Kelly understood the significance. They were the mechanisms through which a carefully constructed narrative was maintained. And when combined with inconsistencies in Meghan's pregnancy narrative, these actions suggested a level of orchestration that went far beyond casual image management. Yet, not everyone in the circle agreed with or supported these strategies. Some associates voiced concerns privately, expressing discomfort with the way narratives were being controlled. Others remained silent, either out of loyalty, fear of reprisal, or uncertainty about how to navigate the complex web of influence Meghan commanded. Kelly, by contrast, began to recognize that silence was complicity. Observing these dynamics, she understood the moral weight of what she had witnessed. It was not simply a matter of friendship. It was a matter of truth, integrity, and accountability. The emotional stakes for Kelly were profound. She loved her friend, but she also recognized the consequences of deception on a global scale. The pregnancy, which millions had celebrated as a joyous milestone, was now shrouded in doubt. Her observations inside the circle revealed the lengths to which Meghan went to control perception, orchestrating appearances, timing announcements, and managing the reactions of both insiders and the public. For Kelly, the realization was both shocking and disheartening. As she began to process these insights, Kelly faced a difficult choice: remain silent and protect her friend's carefully curated image, or speak out and reveal truths that could disrupt not only Meghan's narrative, but also the trust millions had placed in her. The inner circle, in many ways, became a crucible for this decision. Conversations, observations, and private discussions all informed the moment when Kelly finally decided she could no longer stay quiet. Kelly's role in the circle gave her credibility. She wasn't just a friend who overheard rumors. She was a participant in the inner workings of Meghan's life. She saw the planning meetings, understood the strategies, and observed behaviors that suggested calculated image management. When she spoke, she was speaking from a position of intimate knowledge, a perspective that made her confession difficult to dismiss and impossible to ignore. The tension inside the circle escalated as Kelly's observations became more pronounced. She noticed the way certain friends and advisors reacted when inconsistencies were mentioned. Some laughed nervously, others deflected, and a few were visibly concerned. These reactions reinforced her belief that what she had seen was significant, that it mattered, and that it could no longer remain hidden. In describing the inner circle, Kelly also emphasized the emotional complexity of her position. Observing inconsistencies in a friend's narrative is one thing. Realizing that millions of people are invested in a potentially false story is another. The pressure, guilt, and moral dilemma she faced were immense. Her confession was not a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was the culmination of months, perhaps years, of internal debate, observation, and reflection. For fans, the inner circle remains largely invisible. They see public appearances, social media posts, and interviews, but the private conversations, planning sessions, and strategic decisions remain hidden. Kelly's confession offered a rare glimpse behind the curtain, revealing the delicate balance between loyalty, discretion, and truth. It showed that even those closest to Meghan were navigating a complex landscape, where every word and action carried weight, and where moral choices were never simple. As Chapter 5 concludes, the stage is set for an even more dramatic revelation. The inner circle, once thought to be a sanctuary of trust and loyalty, is now a place of tension, observation, and ethical dilemmas. Kelly's insights into these dynamics provide context for the confessions that would follow, illustrating not just the mechanics of a carefully controlled narrative, but the emotional and moral consequences of participating in or observing that world. And yet, despite everything Kelly had witnessed, the most shocking details were still to come. The inconsistencies, orchestrations, and calculated appearances were only the beginning. What Kelly revealed next would bring the hidden realities of Meghan's world into sharp relief, leaving fans questioning everything they had believed about the Duchess and her celebrated pregnancy. She didn't just talk, she dropped receipts. Kelly McKee-Zajfan's revelation went beyond speculation, rumor, or opinion. It was concrete, detailed, and backed by evidence that suggested Meghan Markle's pregnancy, celebrated by millions, may not have been real. For fans who had trusted every announcement, every photo, every milestone, this was seismic. And for those who had long suspected something was off, it was confirmation in the most dramatic form possible. Imagine for a moment being Kelly. You've spent years as Meghan's confidant, privy to intimate conversations, private planning, and strategic decisions. You've observed inconsistencies in timing, behavior, and messaging. And now, you have tangible proof, texts, emails, personal anecdotes, and subtle observations that coalesce into a clear pattern. Evidence that doesn't just hint at something being staged, but strongly suggests it. That's the world Kelly stepped into. and the reason her confession sent shockwaves through fans and insiders alike. The first piece of evidence she revealed was about the timing of Meghan's public announcements. To the average observer, they seemed perfectly natural, joyous, spontaneous, and celebratory. But Kelly, with insider knowledge, noted the deliberate scheduling. Social media posts were carefully timed to maximize impact. Press releases were coordinated with specific outlets, and photo opportunities were meticulously arranged. Every detail appeared designed to tell a story of a natural pregnancy, yet in reality, the timing was too precise to be coincidence. Then there were the photos themselves. Meghan's maternity looks, her posed shots with Prince Harry, and the curated angles all suggested a narrative carefully managed for public consumption. Kelly revealed how outfits were chosen to exaggerate or obscure physical changes, how certain public events were used to reinforce the perception of pregnancy, and how every image was strategically released to maintain momentum in the public narrative. What the world saw as joy, radiance, and authenticity, Kelly knew as careful orchestration. Perhaps most compelling were the private communications. Kelly disclosed snippets of texts and private exchanges that raised red flags. There were moments when schedules didn't align with public statements, when personal anecdotes conflicted with media appearances, and when remarks that seemed casual carried implications inconsistent with what fans were led to believe. Taken together, these pieces of evidence suggested that the public persona of Meghan as a pregnant woman was, at the very least, heavily curated and possibly entirely fabricated. Kelly also shared anecdotes about conversations she had with Meghan that now, in hindsight, seemed carefully constructed. Meghan would speak about milestones, doctor visits, and symptoms in ways that appeared authentic to those around her. Yet subtle inconsistencies suggested an underlying strategy to maintain a convincing narrative. Kelly explained that she often felt a sense of cognitive dissonance, moments of warmth and honesty interspersed with gestures and statements that didn't align with reality. The pattern was subtle, but for someone who knew Meghan intimately, it was impossible to ignore. Another striking piece of evidence involved public appearances timed to reinforce the pregnancy narrative. Events, charitable engagements, and media interviews were strategically scheduled to maintain the perception of a growing family. In some cases, physical gestures were rehearsed to subtly indicate pregnancy, whether through posture, clothing choices, or positioning during public photographs. For the average fan, these details were invisible, but to Kelly, they were unmistakable signs of a narrative under careful control. The cumulative effect of these observations created a damning case. Each individual piece of evidence could be explained away, perhaps as coincidence or careful PR management. But the totality of it, the timing, the images, the messaging, and the private insights, painted a far more troubling picture. Kelly's confession wasn't built on assumption. It was constructed from a mosaic of evidence she had witnessed firsthand. In her interviews, Kelly also highlighted the behavior of Meghan's closest allies. Staff members, advisors, and even certain friends were complicit in maintaining appearances, whether through selective disclosure, controlled social media posts, or the orchestration of photo opportunities. While many acted out of loyalty or obligation, their participation inadvertently lent credibility to a narrative that may not have reflected reality. Kelly observed this dynamic firsthand, and it became a key piece of the evidence she ultimately revealed. One of the most shocking elements Kelly disclosed involved inconsistencies in public statements and media appearances. Meghan would occasionally make remarks about physical experiences or timelines that didn't match known events. In isolation, these could be dismissed as minor slips, but the pattern emerged over time. Kelly explained that the repetition of such inconsistencies, combined with deliberate staging, indicated an effort to craft a story rather than simply share a personal experience. Kelly's evidence also included accounts of private moments that contradicted public perception. Conversations about scheduling, planning, and personal well-being sometimes didn't align with the events fans observed. These discrepancies, she argued, were too precise and recurring to be accidental. They suggested a level of planning that went far beyond ordinary celebrity media management, hinting at a calculated effort to control public perception in a very specific way. It's important to note that Kelly's revelations were not presented with malice. She was not seeking to destroy Meghan's reputation or incite public outrage. Her motivation, she explained, was rooted in truth and integrity. She recognized the profound implications of what she had witnessed, both for her friend and for the millions of people who had celebrated the pregnancy. By sharing her evidence, Kelly aimed to shed light on the reality behind the carefully curated public narrative. Fans immediately began dissecting every element of her revelation. Analysts, commentators, and social media users scrutinized public appearances, timing of announcements, and media coverage. Photos, videos, and public statements were re-examined in light of Kelly's evidence. Patterns previously unnoticed were now interpreted through a lens of skepticism, altering perceptions of a story that had seemed straightforward and joyous. Kelly's evidence also raised questions about the broader implications of celebrity influence. When a figure as high-profile as Meghan Markle presents a narrative as authentic, the world invests emotionally. Fans, journalists, and the public at large are drawn into the story, creating a cycle of trust, celebration, and admiration. When evidence emerges suggesting that trust may have been manipulated, the emotional fallout is significant. Kelly's confession forced millions to reconsider not only Meghan's pregnancy, but also the ways in which public narratives are crafted, controlled, and perceived. And yet, even with this mountain of evidence, the full story was not complete. Kelly's confession hinted at deeper layers of strategy, manipulation, and personal insight that went beyond mere inconsistencies. Her evidence was a doorway, a first glimpse into the inner workings of a world where public perception, personal narrative, and private reality intersect in ways the average observer could never imagine. As Chapter 6 concludes, one fact becomes clear. Kelly's evidence is not simply compelling, it's transformative. It reshapes our understanding of Meghan Markle's public persona, her carefully constructed milestones, and the degree to which appearances may have been orchestrated. And while fans and commentators grapple with the implications, the most explosive revelations are still yet to come. The moment Kelly McKee-Zadfan's confession hit the public, the world erupted. Social media platforms, comment sections, and forums lit up with reactions ranging from shock and disbelief to fury and indignation. Millions of fans who had celebrated Meghan Markle's pregnancy now found themselves questioning everything they thought they knew. The joyous narrative they had embraced, the intimate milestones they had invested in emotionally, suddenly seemed suspect. The confession didn't just generate curiosity, it ignited outrage. Imagine waking up one morning and discovering that an event you had celebrated as deeply personal and authentic might have been staged. The initial reaction is disbelief. How could someone fabricate something so monumental? How could the life-changing, universally celebrated moment of a pregnancy be orchestrated with such precision? Fans reacted with a mix of denial and anger, some defending Meghan vehemently, others turning their disappointment into intense criticism. Within hours, hashtags related to the confession began trending globally. The public reaction was multi-layered. There were fans who felt personally betrayed. For them, Meghan's pregnancy had been a symbol of hope, joy, and connection. It was a milestone they had followed religiously, sharing the excitement with friends, family, and online communities. To hear that it might have been staged was emotionally jarring. How could I have celebrated this? Many wondered. Was I cheering for something that wasn't real? This emotional fallout, Kelly observed, was precisely the kind of impact her confession would have, because it touched not just the story itself, but the trust of millions. Others focused on the social implications. Public perception of Meghan Markle, already a topic of heated debate, shifted dramatically. The narrative of a flawless, authentic, and loving royal figure was suddenly in question. Media outlets raced to cover the story, analyzing interviews, photos, and timelines with renewed scrutiny. Every social media post, every public appearance, and every prior announcement was dissected under the lens of potential fabrication. Fans pored over details, from maternity photo angles to scheduled events, reinterpreting each moment in light of Kelly's revelations. Some reactions were fueled by humor and irony. Memes quickly circulated online, exaggerating aspects of the confession for comedic effect. Users created satirical timelines, comparing staged maternity appearances to scripted television moments. While humor can sometimes soften outrage, In this case, it amplified the narrative, drawing attention to inconsistencies and encouraging broader discussion. The mix of shock, disbelief, and comedy reflected a public grappling with the uncomfortable possibility that reality and performance had been intertwined. Journalists and media commentators weighed in as well. Analysts dissected Kelly's confession with a mixture of skepticism and acknowledgement. On news panels and talk shows, experts debated the credibility of her evidence, the plausibility of a fabricated pregnancy, and the implications for Meghan's public image. Some dismissed it as the gossip of an overzealous friend. Others recognized the pattern and noted that Kelly's insider perspective lent her confession credibility. The conversation was polarizing, with viewers passionately taking sides, defending or condemning Meghan based on their interpretation of the evidence. Meanwhile, online communities fractured into factions. Some staunchly defended Meghan, insisting that Kelly had misinterpreted events or exaggerated her claims. Others became critics, meticulously reviewing photos, social media posts, and press statements for corroborating evidence. Entire forums were dedicated to analyzing the confession, with fan theories multiplying by the hour. For those outside the immediate inner circle, the story became a case study in perception, narrative construction, and the power of insider testimony. The emotional intensity of these reactions cannot be overstated. Millions of people, emotionally invested for years in Meghan's journey, now felt a sense of betrayal. Celebrations that had once been joyful now felt manipulated. Fans questioned not only the pregnancy itself, but also the authenticity of every other milestone, every heartfelt statement, and every media appearance. The confession struck at the core of public trust, and the ripple effects were felt across social media, traditional media, and personal conversations worldwide. Kelly's confession also sparked a broader conversation about the nature of celebrity, perception, and media influence. When a public figure like Meghan presents a narrative as authentic, millions of people invest emotionally, socially, and psychologically. The emotional fallout of discovering potential fabrication is profound, highlighting the power and responsibility of public figures in shaping narratives. Fans weren't just reacting to a pregnancy. They were reacting to the realization that they might have been unwitting participants in a carefully curated story. Among the public, reactions also varied depending on personal identification with Meghan. Some saw themselves reflected in her struggles, ambition, and challenges as a woman navigating fame and public life. Others admired her as a role model, celebrating her elegance, poise, and achievements. Kelly's confession disrupted these perceptions, creating cognitive dissonance. Fans had to reconcile their admiration and emotional attachment with the possibility of manipulation. The result was confusion, outrage, and a fierce desire to uncover the full truth. The intensity of the backlash was amplified by social media's immediacy. Tweets, Instagram stories, and TikTok videos circulated rapidly, creating echo chambers where speculation thrived. Influencers and commentators dissected Kelly's claims, offering both supportive and critical perspectives. Every nuance, every word of her confession, became a topic for debate. The conversation was unrelenting, with each new analysis generating further discussion, reinterpretation, and reaction. For Meghan's inner circle, the public reaction was both predictable and concerning. Staff, friends, and associates who had participated in orchestrated appearances were now under scrutiny. Every role in maintaining the narrative, whether intentional or incidental, was being examined. Kelly's confession had exposed not only inconsistencies in the pregnancy story, but also the mechanisms of control, management, and influence behind the scenes. It was no longer a private matter. The world was watching, analyzing, and forming judgments. Amidst the outrage, there were also moments of empathy and reflection. Some fans recognized the pressures of public life and the complexities of navigating fame, media scrutiny, and personal milestones simultaneously. They acknowledged that maintaining privacy, crafting appearances, and managing public perception is an intricate, often exhausting task. Yet, even with this understanding, Kelly's evidence created tension between empathy and the undeniable signs of fabrication. The public's emotional response was a testament to the power of the confession. It forced a reckoning with both admiration and suspicion. By the end of the day, the story had taken on a life of its own. Media coverage intensified, online communities expanded their discussions, and public figures weighed in, some cautiously, others boldly. Fans continued to debate, speculate, and share theories. The confession had transcended mere gossip. It was now a cultural moment, shaping perceptions of Meghan Markle, her life milestones, and the complex world of celebrity influence. But even with all this attention, the most shocking revelations were still ahead. The patterns Kelly observed, the subtle behaviors she documented, and the evidence she revealed hinted at truths deeper than the public had yet seen. What fans reacted to initially, the hint of